awesome power of our planet.
The entire families were buried right underneath our feet.
Capable of unimaginable destruction.
It was a fire-breathing dragon coming down that canyon.
It shows no mercy.
I said, this thing, I'm saying to myself, it's going to kill people. It has to be killing people.
Tornadoes, hurricanes, volcanoes, floods. They strike with increasingly deadly force.
Kill one and 150 come to the funeral.
Join us as we count down the biggest and most terrifying natural phenomena ever to hit the Earth's surface. Next, on the Ultimate 10 Natural Disasters. The Great Galveston Hurricane of 1900. The 1906 San Francisco earthquake and fire. These catastrophic events all happened before seismographs and meteorologists.
For long-track deadly tornado. It is moving through northern sections of amber.
But despite technological advances,
Hello? Hello?
we still cannot escape Mother Nature's fury. Kicking off our countdown is a cataclysmic event that has continued to this day.
The whole top of the mountain was just shivering, 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 up and down under your feet.
The tiny Caribbean island of Montserrat is a lush emerald green jewel rising from the deep blue waters of the Atlantic Ocean. David Lee and his family have lived in this tropical paradise for 20 years.
Montserrat is one of the most incredible places in the world, and its people are the sweetest. The climate is beautiful, tropical breezes, and beautiful fruits in Montserrat.
But beneath this fertile foliage lies a colony of volcanoes, asleep for centuries.
Soufriere Hills volcano was regarded as being dormant because it hadn't erupted in some 400 years. But there are volcanoes that we've called extinct that have erupted and surprised people.
On July 18th, 1995, Soufriere Hills and the entire southern region awoke to an eruptive roar. Ash and rock exploded 25,000 feet into the air, and searing hot gases cascaded down the mountainside. Despite the dangers, videographer David Lee was captivated and set out to document the volcanic blasts.
Volcanoes are seductive. They just sort of entice you and lure you to come closer.
Don't do this at home. Anybody watching this? Don't be stupid enough to come up here. Do I look scared? I'm not out of here yet. I'm only down about 600 feet. If the whole thing went, wouldn't have a chance up here.
David kept his distance from the fiery giant for the next year, until it came looking for him.
I was in town. I was in Plymouth, and my wife called and said, "Are you in town?" I said, "Yeah." And she said, "It looks like the whole mountain has blown up." I jumped in my car, drove out to the main road. It's pitch black there. Pitch black there. And I looked up and I saw this black, it's just like ink, moving across the sky above my head. And I raced and I raced, and I thought maybe I can get to the north before it falls. And we're just gonna miss the edge of it, I hope. Couldn't see anything, couldn't see the lights, the headlights of the car, only the dashboard lights. Stones and rocks and pebbles and everything began to fall on the roof of the car, and I couldn't even hear anymore. And within 52 seconds, it was pitch black.
Many of the rocks thrown out, they sailed through the air like ballistic shells. When I try to imagine a scene like this, it gives me the chills. It's a volcanologist's nightmare, but this is what happened at Soufriere.
I saw a glimmer of a taillight ahead of me. And fortunately, the guy ahead of me had not stopped. And I said, "Oh, please don't stop," because I thought, what if this went on for a few days? What if it went on for at least a few hours? I could get trapped in here. I could suffocate in here. Maybe it would cover my van up. I didn't know what was going to happen.
15 minutes later, David emerged, miraculously spared. No one was hurt by the volcano's fury that day, but the worst was still to come.
June 25th of 1997 was a dark day in the history of Montserrat. This was probably the biggest catastrophe that we've ever experienced, and it really touched almost every family in Montserrat.
Today, 2/3 of the island is in ruins. Sadly, of the original 11,000 inhabitants, only about 4,000 remain. The capital city, Plymouth, is abandoned under a blanket of choking volcanic ash, and the eruptions continue like a curse upon the island.
No one can forecast when this will end. It could end tomorrow. It may take years and years for it to end.
But David Lee and his family are staying.
Montserrat with the volcano is still better than any place else in the world, and we'll be here after the last boat leaves.
For its relentless destruction, Montserrat's Soufriere Hills volcano erupts at number 10 on our list. In at number 9 is the most chilling disaster to crush the French Alps in more than 90 years.
I was just being thrown here and there, and I had no control.
The French Alps, pristine mountain slopes laden in crisp, thick blankets of powder-soft snow, an irresistible sight for avid skiers, and the reason tens of thousands of mountain lovers flock to the French Alps region each year. But this kind of beauty comes with a darker side. In February 1999, the town of Les Brévières was in the height of the ski season.
I think I was aware before I went over that it was snowing, or there was snow on its way in, which I considered good news because you need snow to ski.
7 feet of snow had turned the region into a winter wonderland, but in this case, it was too much of a good thing.
We wanted to go skiing, we couldn't ski, the mountain was closed.
In fact, it was my idea to go for a walk. I said, it's a beautiful day, it's not snowing, we're warm, let's go for a walk. And we all agreed that was a good idea.
Joined by her friends, Paul and Karen, the threesome strolled away from the village to take in the spectacular scenery.
Paul was the first person actually to notice it. There's a huge grumbling noise coming from the mountains on our left-hand side.
And we heard a really loud, thundery noise. It sounded like a low-flying airplane. Well, the split second after I saw it and saw how big it was, I thought I'm dead. It was at least a quarter of a mile wide, maybe wider, and it was pummeling down the mountain on the other side, taking out trees. I think Maddie and Karen didn't realise how much danger we were in, but the sheer size of it made me realise we had about a second or two before it engulfed us.
The trio faced a slab avalanche, the most fatal of its kind, where layers upon layers of old and new snow fall like chunks of wet cement.
I lost Karen. Within that second, it really didn't take very long. I couldn't breathe. I thought, my God, this is it. I'm dying.
I guess it's like being hit by a big wave where it splashes over you. And if you can imagine a wave going over you and just continually hitting you, the snow just kept coming and coming and coming.
Miraculously, Paul and Karen were only partially buried and were able to dig themselves out.
I still couldn't see anything, apart from because there was so much snow, clouds of snow everywhere. So I shouted for Maddie, but there was no response.
Maddie! I could hear a voice, and I recognized it was Paul's voice, shouting my name. Maddie! Maddie! And I couldn't answer him because I was covered. Then somehow I felt I could move my hand freely in the air. I managed to get my face to the air. And it was such a relief. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that I actually survived.
A series of deadly avalanches had obliterated the towns of Chamonix, Les Tours, and Montreuil. It took the efforts of more than 200 rescuers to plow through the snow and debris, and the casualties were devastating.
Probably the worst thing as a rescue is going through the wreckage of people's homes, just personal possessions just destroyed, strewn everywhere. It's a terrible scene.
In the end, the avalanche tragically claimed 12 lives, some small children. It is the region's worst avalanche disaster in 9 decades, and it still sends Paul reeling.
I think the sound of airplanes in the mountains always just makes me just go, just always a moment that just makes me think, avalanche, just for a split second. I can't get away from that moment's panic.
For blanketing a region in fear, the French Alps avalanche slides into the number 9 spot on our list. In at number 8 is the worst catastrophe in history to barrel through Central America.
Entire families were buried right underneath our feet.
On the evening of October 26, 1998, a hurricane by the name of Mitch was pummeling its way through the Caribbean. Winds topped 180 miles per hour.
It had sucked so much moisture out of the Caribbean. The rainfall amounts were incredible.
As it headed west, the wind slowed and Hurricane Mitch metamorphosized into a slow, crawling killer.
Once it had entered Central America and Honduras and Guatemala, he just sat there and it rained and it rained and it rained.
An unusual 40 to 60 inches of rain fell on Honduras in a single week, more than twice the average amount the United States sees in an entire year. Torrents of water and mud surged across the countryside. Within 5 days, the deadly storm had dissipated to a tropical depression, but the damage had already been done. Stunned by the fatal effects on Honduras, New Orleans filmmaker Stephen Scafidi decided to document the tragedy.
We pulled up to this location in the heart of Tegucigalpa, which is the capital city, and I noticed all this mud. I'm talking 2-story buildings that were totally under the mud. The cars were overturned and sitting on top of the mud, and there was this peculiar odor when we got there. And I mean, I can still smell it today. It's the smell of death.
Widespread flooding throughout the nation washed away entire villages, claiming nearly 11,000 lives. Approximately 1 million people were displaced as the rain ravaged more than 220,000 homes.
There were over 200 and some odd bridges that were totally destroyed, which is 75 to 80% of all the bridges in Honduras. That cut off their complete infrastructure for traveling from one side of the country to the other.
Nicaragua, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Belize suffered casualties in the hundreds, but the magnitude of the devastation was greatest in Honduras. Experts believe it will take about 15 years for Honduras to recover. Damages were estimated at a total of $10 billion. For being the most damaging disaster to hit Central America, Hurricane Mitch storms in at number 8 on our list of the ultimate 10 natural disasters. Coming up, the Earth shifts and an entire city is under siege. And rampaging waters burst through a Canadian town. Welcome back. We are counting down the ultimate 10 natural disasters. Our number 7 story is the worst event to shake a modern industrial city in nearly a century.
It was one of the most horrific earthquakes that I have ever seen.
In northwestern Turkey lies a thriving industrial city called Izmit. Located 56 miles from Istanbul, Izmit is dotted with concrete buildings supporting the region's flourishing economy. But at 3 a.m. August 17, 1999, a massive earthquake struck Izmit and everything came crashing to a deadly halt. Local resident, 18-year-old Omer Kane, was asleep in her apartment complex when the quake slammed the region.
I was woken up by the earthquake and suddenly ran to my mother.
The strong, violent shaking lasted for more than 40 seconds, and without warning, their 7-story complex tumbled down around them. The quake sent shockwaves for more than 200 miles.
The Izmit earthquake registered a magnitude 7.4 on the Richter scale. This was the strongest and the largest recorded earthquake to hit a modern industrial area since the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. Turkey doesn't have a good checks and balance system to build buildings that are earthquake resistant. Over 117,000 apartments and residences either have major significant damage or collapsed.
Omer lay trapped beneath the rubble of her residence, pinned by tons of collapsed concrete, with her mother motionless beside her.
I thought about such things like, my mother, is she dead? She didn't make any noise. Or is she just momentarily unconscious?
For 7 hours, Omer clung to life under a wall of debris, until suddenly...
They said, here she is. And then they started talking to me. They said that they will rescue me. The place where they opened a hole was very close to my head, and the light was coming to me. Then I asked for water.
Omer's head was at a strained angle. It was clear that her neck was broken. After 8 harrowing hours, Omer is finally freed from her concrete tomb. It is a bittersweet moment as rescuers then discover her mother.
I heard voices who said, this woman is dead. They spoke about my mother. I started crying.
Omer's mother was among the 17,000 people who died as a result of this cataclysmic event. Today, Omer, much like the city of Izmit, has found the courage to begin anew.
I am always developing myself further. My progress never stopped. Then I walked with 2 crutches. Today I managed to walk with 1. I never went a single step back.
For being the most destructive earthquake to ever strike Turkey, the Izmit shaking rumbles in at number 7 on our list. Next on our countdown, a Canadian town discovers the terrifying power of floodwater.
I was thinking, oh my God, it can't happen. It can't happen.
Chicoutimi is a picturesque Canadian town nestled some 200 miles northeast of Quebec's capital, Montreal. The province is surrounded by a maze of beautiful man-made lakes and meandering rivers, which funnel through dams above the town, providing abundant hydroelectric power to the residents. It's been home for sisters Janine and Ghislaine Perron for 50 years.
It's dead gorgeous. There are many mountains. It's very beautiful.
Chicoutimi is very pleasant to live. We're always sure to run into someone when we go somewhere.
July 1996. Summer was in full swing for this town of 30,000. But as the hazy days of summer passed, something ominous loomed on the horizon.
A tremendous, what I call comma, or a low pressure system, had built, and it started to rain. It really rained. On July the 19th and the 20th, more than 12 inches of rain fell over a 36-hour period.
The rivers swelled and vast quantities of water poured into the dam located just above the town of Chicoutimi.
And all of a sudden, we hit a critical point here where it was beyond the capacity of the engineers to control it any longer. The dikes busted, the great dams overflowed, and it was like a snowball effect. It was like dominoes.
A ferocious wall of water tore through the valley. Janine Perron was in her home and directly in the flood path.
I heard someone screaming in the courtyard. I went to have a look, and I saw the firemen all dressed up. They told me, your house is going to disappear.
The water showed no mercy. 30 million cubic meters of water, 300 times the flow of Niagara Falls, struck like a liquid bomb.
C'est impressionnant à voir. Parce que moi, mon ami,
The river was swollen, sweeping everything on its way. Tables, chairs, pans, fridges, anything that the water could take on its way. It really looked like a catastrophe. It was like a war.
The deluge lasted 5 long days before the waters began to recede. 10 people lost their lives. 16,000 were evacuated. It was a $700 million disaster that scarred more than the landscape.
I lost everything, and you can't do anything about it.
This great infrastructure that had been developed for the past 100 years had been completely destroyed, and the entire river valley was flooded. And so, of course, the loss of property here was immense.
For being a deluge of devastating scale in Canada's history, the Chicoutimi flood comes in at number 6 on our list of the ultimate 10 natural disasters. When we come back, a plague that will make your skin crawl.
The ground would simply be alive with mice.
And an event so powerful, it was felt across the planet.
I just couldn't fathom what was about to happen to us.
And stay tuned to find out what will be our number 1 natural disaster. Welcome back. We are halfway through our countdown of the ultimate 10 natural disasters. Number 5 on our list, an event of biblical proportions, the only one like it in the world.
You wonder what we've done to deserve it.
Southern Australia, a sun-dappled stretch of open fields and blue skies. It's the agricultural center of the country. Horsham resident Kelvin Mills is one of thousands of farmers that helped make Australia the 4th largest producer of wheat in the world. The spring of '93 started out like any other year for Kelvin. The soil was tilled, the seeds planted, and rich, healthy crops began to transform the countryside to a lush green. But as fall loomed, farmers began to notice something sinister rustling through the undergrowth. Mice.
By putting traps out in the paddocks, we measured up to 4,000 mice an acre. You could barely walk anywhere without seeing lots of mice.
Within a month, a plague of mice swept the countryside. They bred so fast that their population doubled every 2 weeks as they fed on tender grains of the abundant crops.
Mice eat an awful lot of both grain and green material, and they eat about as much as one sheep. 50 mice are equivalent to one sheep.
And with 4,000 mice per acre, farmer Kelvin Mills' crops were quickly decimated.
You've got areas of crop that should produce $600 a hectare. If they're totally eaten out, you're getting nothing off it.
You wonder what we've done to deserve it.
The farmers discover that nothing is mouse-proof.
Mice can get through about a 1/4 inch space. Somehow or other they seem to be able to dislocate their shoulders, and they can get through very narrow gaps, causing all sorts of troubles in the local sheds, eating the electrical wiring, causing fires in sheds.
You pick up a sheet of iron and 1,000 mice will run away and seek cover. It's just a repulsive sight.
Farmers in the area desperately tried to keep the swarming tide of mice at bay.
Kill one and 150 come to the funeral.
After 6 long weeks and crop losses escalating more than $100 million, the plague left as mysteriously as it arrived.
The plague can disappear within a few days. Now, we're not quite sure why. We think there may be some sort of very infectious disease that goes right through the population. I mean, one day you can be almost knee-deep in mice, and within 2 or 3 days they're almost totally gone. I would say that it is the most hated and most feared sort of problem that people have, and people being through a mouse plague never ever forget.
For taking a bite out of Australia's agricultural industry, the mouse plague creeps into the number 5 spot on our list. In at number 4, the largest wave to ever hit North America's west coast.
There was no way out for what we were going to be experiencing.
The quaint seaside town of Seward rests on the rugged coast of Alaska, a vast expanse of majestic mountains and unspoiled wilderness. Doug McCrae and his sister Linda McSwain have spent their entire lives in this town perched on the edge of the Pacific.
Seward's a small town set at the head of Resurrection Bay. The population of approximately 3,000. I'm a little partial to it. I was born and raised here.
It's a small community, absolutely beautiful little town, beautiful water, beautiful mountains, beautiful air, wonderful people.
But deep beneath this region's scenic beauty lies the potential for catastrophe.
Alaska is located on the northern portion of the Ring of Fire, and this is where you have lots of earthquake and volcanic activity.
At 5:36 p.m., March 24th, 1964, this quiet town was awakened by rumbling in the earth.
My sister said, I think there's an earthquake, but just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger by the second. The ground was froze solid. It was March, and it was cracking like glass, shattered, and cracks going all directions.
Another real shaker. The whole car is bouncing around like a ham on a hook here.
It was as if the whole house had been, someone had grabbed it and was just shaking it as hard as it could.
Alaska had been slammed by a massive 8.2 magnitude earthquake. It was felt as far away as California, 3,000 miles to the south.
The ground shaking lasted for over 4 minutes, which is one of the longest earthquakes that's been ever recorded.
The area is a major disaster area.
When the monster quake finally subsided, leaving an eerie calm in its wake, Doug McCrae knew something was very wrong.
There was no water in the bay. Yeah, it was like the lowest tide I'd ever seen in my life. And I remember that more than anything, that where'd the water go? I just couldn't fathom what was about to happen to us.
Then, triggered by the quake, a 40-foot wall of water known as a tsunami headed for the bay.
When we first saw it, I didn't think there was no chance that we were going to ever survive it. The wave itself was a solid wall, just almost straight up and down.
Doug, Linda, and the entire McCrae family scramble for the only high ground available, the roof.
I remember we were all down on the roof, on this pitched roof, holding hands. That wave just hit us so hard.
The house, you could feel it shuddering, and something was breaking loose.
The powerful wave ripped the house clean off its foundation.
And we were spinning, very rough movement, and the trees had really long branches, and the chance that someone could have been swept off by a branch was certainly very, very real.
After a 20-minute battering, the McCraes were finally lodged in a treetop. The death-defying ride was over.
I wouldn't have given a nickel for our lives when we originally saw the first wave. It was there was no chance of surviving it. To this day, I don't see how we come through it.
Tragically, the tsunami claimed 106 lives and decimated an entire city.
From our viewpoint, it looked like the end of the world. All we could see was smoke and flame. We couldn't see town.
Today, the scars of '64 are hidden beneath Seward's new roads and housing, but the events of March 24th will never fade in the minds of the McCrae family.
The tsunami had an enormous impact on my life. I'm very, very happy to be alive. I'm very lucky to be alive. I'm lucky that everyone in my family survived.
For unleashing the most destructive killer wave to ever strike the Northern Hemisphere, the Alaskan tsunami is our number 4 natural disaster. Don't go away. When we come back, a disaster that entombed a town.
The deafening rustle was the last sensations I had before being swallowed up.
And white-hot flames erupt in the midst of a city.
All of a sudden, it was like a hurricane that was on fire.
Stay tuned to find out our number 1 ultimate natural disaster. Welcome back to the Ultimate 10 Natural Disasters. Next on our countdown, a mud trap that entombed an Italian town.
Was really a disaster waiting to happen.
Approximately 75 miles east of Naples lies the charming village of Sarno. This southern Italian town is nestled in the center of a deep valley, cradled by large sloping mountains, which makes for spectacular scenery. But when rainfall exceeds the average 3 inches, this quaint town is at risk of becoming a dangerous mud trap.
The forests were cut, agriculture moved into these areas, and so the natural stability of the environment was really a disaster waiting to happen.
On May 5th, 1998, the rain began. 6 inches of torrential downpour in just 2 days, and the earthen slopes above Sarno began to liquefy. A massive wall of mud came crashing down on the 35,000 unsuspecting residents below.
Many cars started driving down from the opposite, forbidden direction, wildly honking with fog lights and people screaming.
Engulfing everything in its path, the mudslides headed right toward the family home of Roberto Robustelli.
I persuaded my father that leaving was the best thing to do. We heard rustling, and all of a sudden a black wave 6 to 7 meters high invaded our house. We didn't even have time to look back when I felt it right behind my shoulders. At that point I heard for the last time the screams of my father. I started hitting against windows, entering houses, finding myself on the ground rolling together with animals.
The mud dumped Roberto in the remnants of a dank mechanic's garage, but his ordeal was only just beginning.
These are my fingerprints, because when I was here I was moving around trying to understand by touch where I was, being without light. As you can see, I went around the perimeter of the room because I was walking trying to understand what was happening to me. I was about to leave this place when a second wave of mud arrived.
The second rush of dense mud smashed Roberto up against the ceiling.
I was only left with a small open space up high. Only my head was left outside, and I was moving like a duck in quicksand, trying not to sink.
Hours, then days passed as Roberto's screams for help went unanswered.
I thought that the most intelligent thing to do was drinking my urine. And this is what I did twice.
72 hours later came the first signs of hope.
I started to hear some noise getting closer and closer. I saw a light passing through. I could hear the voices of my brother-in-law and of my cousin.
It took 6 hours of frantic digging before Roberto was finally raised to safety.
They brought me on a terrace where a helicopter picked me up. Outside there, it looked like a stadium full of people clapping at me, cheering while calling my name and crying.
More than 150 mudslides occurred in Sarno, damaging or destroying 1,500 structures and claiming 137 lives. It was the most catastrophic disaster to strike southern Italy in more than a century, a $500 million calamity. For wreaking havoc in a small town on a large scale, the Sarno mudslides weigh in at number 3. Number 2 on our list is the worst fiery disaster in nearly a century to ravage coastal California.
And it just took off like gasoline had fallen out of the sky.
Perched high above the bayside city of Oakland, California, is the exclusive neighborhood of Oakland Hills. Houses are nestled in this lush green hideaway, but its idyllic setting belies a very real risk for residents and firefighters alike.
The Oakland Hills area is extremely at risk for fires because of the very nature of the topography of the area. The vegetation and buildings that are so close together, it makes it very difficult to fight fires.
This was the case on October 19, 1991. The warm, dry summer left the area parched and dangerously dry. Reports had come in that a small fire was burning in the hills. Within minutes, it was out of control.
I was on Engine Company 16, and we had gotten the call to go up, and they started moving units in to take care of it, and it just took off like gasoline had fallen out of the sky.
The thick undergrowth burnt with terrifying fury. Blown by 25-mile-per-hour winds, flames engulfed the hills at a rate of 5 feet per second.
When the winds really picked up, there was that one point where just all of a sudden it was like a hurricane that was on fire.
Rosso was sent to protect an apartment complex perilously close to the burning hillside, but he wasn't prepared for the scene that awaited him.
That's something I'll never forget. The look on people's faces. I remember being struck by the panic and terror that everybody that was running from their apartment. I actually thought of my family. I was hoping I would get to see them again, because I really thought if this thing turns down on top of us, we won't have any place to run.
It's already on fire. Can we start getting people out? Yeah, let's just go get the place evacuated. Go up, leave your car, walk. All right?
The wind got extremely strong. I mean, it must have been 50 miles an hour because it blew the helmet right off my head.
Oakland Hills resident Jan Corwin was unaware of the drama unfolding below until his youngest daughter began to smell smoke.
I said, Marissa, I'm sure you're just seeing some smoke from somebody burning something on the barbecue. Don't worry about it. This is when things started to change literally by the second. A large fireball just kind of erupts behind the houses across the street. I just could not believe that. I mean, these flames were 20 to 40 feet in the air.
Jan grabbed his 2 daughters and jumped in the car as day darkened ominously around them.
Everything that you can see is in flames, and plus it's so dark out now, you have no idea if it's 11 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock in the morning. At this point, we see this car is on fire, people running, you couldn't see.
The gargantuan fire burnt at temperatures in excess of 2,000 degrees, hot enough to boil asphalt and melt glass.
Everybody was just screaming and yelling and in a state of fear. I mean, it was pretty chaotic.
After more than 30 devastating hours in hellish conditions, firefighter Larry Rosso is finally sent home.
The burning embers and sparks that had been blowing around, it caused blisters on my eyeballs, and I couldn't fight anymore.
But Rosso's fellow firefighters battled on. The fire burnt out of control for 10 hours, consuming 1,500 acres, 3,500 homes, and causing $1.5 billion of damage. But with the dawn of October 20th, the true toll becomes apparent. 25 bodies were recovered.
3 to 5 houses a minute were being burned. That's just hard to comprehend when you stand in your house and you think it would take 20 to 30 seconds and it's gone.
I feel fortunate I survived it. My daughter survived it, and we're here today flourishing.
The Oakland Hills fire is the deadliest natural disaster to strike the region since the San Francisco quake and fire of 1906, which is why it comes in at number 2 on our list. When we come back, our number 1 ultimate natural disaster is revealed. Welcome back to the ultimate 10 natural disasters. From deadly eruptions and hellfires to mice plagues, ferocious winds, and unstoppable rains, we've seen almost every weapon in Mother Nature's arsenal, but we've saved the most awesome of them all to top our list. Our number 1 natural disaster is the most terrifying display of raw power and merciless destruction in recorded history.
I'm saying to myself, it's going to kill people. It has to be killing people.
Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, a Midwestern town lodged directly in the path of Tornado Alley. Residents here are no strangers to calamity. But on May 3rd, 1999, the sky suggested something that would rattle these battle-worn locals forever.
May 3rd started out like hundreds of other days here in Oklahoma. Some conditions were favorable for tornadoes. Other parameters weren't there. You have certain upper atmospheric conditions that cause the air to go up. You have some heating. You'll have winds coming together. And if you have those upper air conditions that are just right, that turning of the wind that's proper, and the proper wind speeds, as that air goes up, it will just start to spin.
Storm tracker Val Castor was watching the thunderheads develop 50 miles south of Oklahoma City from his perch inside his chase vehicle.
Well, you know, I've been chasing for probably 15 years or so, and May 3rd was a very unique day. I'd say around 4 or so, we started seeing the first storms go up. It started growing faster and faster, and I called Gary and I said, man, you know, this storm is getting stronger all the time.
By 5:30 in the evening, the storm reached critical mass with Val in hot pursuit.
The clouds were just boiling. It was very dark, very ominous looking, and the rotation was extremely strong.
Huge rotation close to the ground. Tornadoes on the ground. We got a funnel on the ground right now, right inside. Tornado on the ground. Debris cloud. Debris cloud. There it is. Multiple vortex tornado one. Oh, yeah. See it. 60 right now.
You didn't run into him!
Get us back on the air.
We're up, we're up, we're up.
Back at Channel 9, Gary England and his staff watched with growing concern. Video from the field started to pour in, and the terrifying magnitude of the tornado became apparent. This was the deadliest level of tornado, an F5.
I had never seen anything like it in my entire life. I never even dreamed about anything like that. This thing was a monster.
Get below ground. You folks get south of this storm. Get below ground immediately. Okay.
Until now, the tornado had raged across mainly rural farmlands, but its northeasterly course had it aiming for the densely populated suburbs of Oklahoma City.
Oh, power line flash.
And it became obvious to me that people probably were dying, or terrible things were happening to them.
People.
Wind speeds in this tornado began to reach 318 miles per hour. Gary England broadcast a desperate warning.
You need to be below ground with this storm. This is a deadly tornado.
I've been here 28 years, and 5:56 p.m., as I said, you're going to need to be below ground level to survive.
Teacher Gary Dominguez was in his home in the neighboring town of Moore when he heard England's plea.
It was heading across the highway that's very close to where, kind of where I live. And they were saying how severe it was.
Without a basement, he ran for the only safety there was, his bathtub.
And by the time I got to my bathroom and got 1 foot into the bathtub, all the front windows flew out. And within like 2 seconds, the entire apartment started shaking. And within a few more seconds, it stopped. So I stood up, basically, and then when I looked out, what used to be where my apartment was nothing, absolutely nothing.
Hello? Hello? Can you hear me?
8,000 houses were damaged, some swept clean off their foundations. 46 people lay dead, and 900 more were severely injured. The tornado caused $1 billion in damage, 3 times as much as any previous storm in history. It was the most powerful, most destructive tornado ever recorded.
Over a 4-hour period, at any particular time, there were 20 or 30 tornadoes on the ground, active, living and dying. So it was like a swarm of killer bees. Everything in its path was just cut to pieces.
But the people of Oklahoma are not strangers to tragedy and have once again begun to rebuild their shattered lives.
We're going to have more tornadoes, and we'll deal with them just like we always dealt with them. We'll pick up the pieces and put it back together again and go on.
Well, we'd been here, almost be here a year, May 20th. Guess we'll get a new house again, okay?
For a tornado this size, going through a major metropolitan area like Oklahoma City, it's amazing that it didn't kill more people. And to me, that's a miracle.
for causing death and destruction of unparalleled magnitude, the 1999 Oklahoma City tornadoes top our list at number 1. Natural disasters are nature's reminder that planet Earth is a living thing, an entity with which we must coexist. And sometimes when our planetary partner flexes its mighty muscle, it exacts a hefty price. And unfortunately, it is a price we have no choice but to pay.
I always say don't fool with Mother Nature or she'll definitely come back and bite you.